Mayor Skook.
Present.
Vice Mayor Nye.
Here.
Councilmember Mallory.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Here.
And Councilmember Grossman.
I'm here too.
Thank you. We have a quorum, Mayor.
Diane. Okay, we'll go on to number 3, discussion regarding the chip seal project. Norm?
Thank you, Mayor Council. This item you have before you is our annual chip seal maintenance contract administered through Public Works. I do like to always point out that this is our big program of the year, and we prepare all of our streets in order for this final layer of chip seal we put on. So as in typical years, what's important to note about chip seal, that you do have the season, which is basically June to August. With those warm summer months, that's the best time to apply chip seal. But with our budget basically ending June 30th, it can be problematic at times making sure we bid this thing right. So we are bidding this particular project early in anticipation. I want to show council this is next year's particular budget. So this has been proposed and it's well through the budget process. But this will be next year's money, 15-16 money, starting July 1st. So next year's budget does have an enhancement of another, from this year's current budget, another $600,000 to $1 million is the aggregate amount of this particular contract next year. We did go out for contractor bid, fully anticipating that the contractor knows he wouldn't start till after July 1st. And we did get 5 competitive bids from contractors and very good bids that came in right where staff anticipated. So we will move forward to recommend that we award it to Earth Resources. Do want to back up just a little bit. The board you see here is the actual big board that we plan our street maintenance throughout the year. Difficult to see at this scale, but that's what staff uses throughout the year because, as I point out, chip seal is the final layer of roadway maintenance. As you can see, the overhead you have is a snapshot of some of the roads we're doing. With this year's particular project, we're doing several arterial collector roads. Robert Road is due up in the cycle. Navajo Drive is due up in the cycle. Even Lakeshore Drive all the way out to Fane Road is due in the cycle. So we're doing some of our major arterials, which will have good visibility for the public and the residents of Prescott Valley. I always like to point out every year of the particular maintenance cycle, the reason there's so many different colors, it does color code a particular maintenance cycle. I think council's aware that of that cycle it tells us when's the last time we did a particular roadway. This works very well when I take the public meetings out in some subdivisions or HOA meetings when they say, geez, when do you plan to maintain our roads and when do we do up next? Works very effectively on all those angles, even with staff. I think council is well aware when we maintain a pavement, the first maintenance course is to crack seal. Council is probably aware in the fall we award to an outsourced crack seal vendor buy the crack seal material off of state contract, and we've spent this year $100,000 getting these particular roads maintained with crack seal. Next, I think council is aware also that we also do some edge patching in-house in streets. You know, my slides aren't quite working right. Just well, I'm going to have to do without it, Mayor Council. So I think you're aware of the crack seal operation we've done, in addition to some of the edge patching. All these particular roads, I think one of the most visible right now is Lakeshore Drive. You can see some of the crack sealing we've done, in addition to fixing some of the pavement edge patching that we do in-house by buying materials. We spend up in the neighborhood of another $100,000 with buying for our annual contract and having our streets guys patch some of the existing roads that we prepare in order for this particular chip seal operation. I don't know if Diane can get it operating here.
So the turquoise color is the current year?
The current year is actually, if you look on the small ones, it's actually the black and yellow, and actually the blue and white is what we're going to apply this year. In the small neighborhood streets, they are blue and white. There's some of the edge patching you can see. Some of the streets guys have been performing in advance. This is a couple years old, but they do prepare the streets after it's crack sealed. Some of the edges break out, and we also will patch localized settlements in addition to restore the edges where necessary too. So all part of the year-long operation. As I mentioned, we've spent a couple $100,000 preparing the actual streets that will be chip sealed. Here's a crack seal operation that we did this past fall, and once again, the shoulder seasoned in the late fall is the time to best apply crack seal when the pavement's cold. So here's a good example of some of the areas we're doing. Here's Quellwood. It's time to hit some of those newer subdivisions. You can see the blue and white is some of the lower volume roads, and of course the red, black and yellow is some of the major arterials. And this does show our particular maintenance cycle. And you see Stone Ridge Drive is delineated there, and you can see Lakeshore Drive is one of the ones delineated there. One thing, Councilman Whiting, you talked about what color is delineated. I do like to point out, when we look at this maintenance cycle, we're about an 8.5 year cycle now. The extra $600,000 got us about half a year of catching up on maintenance. I talked last year we had about a 9-year maintenance cycle. We want to look anywhere from 5 to 7. Probably the major arterials about a 5-year rotation. Some of the residential streets, 7-year is a good recommendation for pavement maintenance. One thing I do want to point out where this map really demonstrates when you're spending money most effectively. You may look, we talked about arterial collectors. You can see Lakeshore Drive here is denoted in that particular green color. Well, if you look at the key map here, that would say that we did it 9 years ago. Well, and you might say, well, how come it's not getting maintenance? Well, this shows that if you look at our capital budget for next year, that's the same section of road that we're going to totally rehab and tear up the whole pavement. My point is, it's at the end of its service life. We haven't spent any more money other than filling cracks and potholes than what's necessary. That's where we see cost savings on having this color-coded map over the long maintenance cycle where you can save money. So as you can see, Lakeshore Drive's in a chip seal, but we're not going to do it because we're going to totally rehab it, as I mentioned. So very cost-effective way to use our available maintenance dollars and apply them most best to our roadway system. With that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any particular questions. We did receive very good bids. I did want to add, I always get feedback from the contractors. What we do very well in Prescott Valley is we get our budget ready every year, and we do that hard work, and we're ready to spend money July 1st. Other municipalities that don't approve their budgets till late July, mid-August, they can't bid a project like this. Contractors actually tell me, I got nowhere to work because municipalities aren't ready to do this. Very much so. The oil suppliers say we're not supplying oil. The contractor said we don't have any work because typically they do municipal work. And most municipalities, they can't spend any money because they stop June 30th. They don't pick back up until July or August. Contractors are ready to work, and I think we get the best price because they're ready to work and oil suppliers can get it to us here. So always want to applaud council. We're doing this a little early, but we get the best price. Contractors ready to go. We close out the old budget and start new, and we do get a very, very good price, what you can expect for chip seals. So I do applaud council's effort and, of course, finance and management that we get our budget going and we're ready to go July 1st. Helps immensely in this chip seal program, and that's why we like to come present it to you early and get ready for the new budget year. Any questions I can answer?
Questions, anyone?
I just had a comment. I just want to say that Norm and his group do a great job with the roads here and for what we have to deal with when it comes to not receiving our shared revenue and things like that. You know what? You do a fabulous job in maintaining, and our growth has been great, and I know you have a lot going on, so appreciate everything that you and your group do.
I think our pets out on the streets, guys, they do take pride in the work product they have out there with the money available.
But any other questions?
So this is our big program, Mayor, so we'll bring it back next week to award, and we'll get started after July 1st in the new budget year, if that's okay with council.
We need it, Norm. We want our roads maintained.
Yes, they do.
Good.
Nice to be able to spend some money on it.
Okay. No other questions? Anything else, Norm?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. Okay, we move on to number 4, discussion regarding the proposed purchase of interactive voice response system from Selecton Technologies. Mark?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Just to maybe a quick recap, I was here a few weeks ago discussing or introducing to you the interactive voice response system that we are highly hoping to purchase in the next few months. Just a quick recap of what I discussed and presented last time. The IVR system is basically a conduit to let our customers talk specifically to a phone system. They're able to communicate with that phone system and pay their bills, which allows for a big increase in their convenience and allows them to access their information at their demand. The IVR system uses a pre-recorded voice system. We have a few different options with it to use a pre-recorded message or an actual person who prompts. We can record those also. So it's a little bit more personal, not so animated. The big benefits that this system will bring to our operation is the 24-hour access for our customers. My train of thought right now is that right now we allow our customers a 40-hour time frame per week to pay their bills over the phone. With this system, we allow them a 24/7 access to pay their bill, to access their information, to make payments, extended partial payments, anything that they so desire with their water and sewer accounts. What we are projecting with this is that our customer satisfaction will increase. Again, it puts the ball in their court as far as when they want to pay their bill, not when we're available for them to pay their bill. Not having so many rings during our busy times of the day, times of the year, the system's going to pick up their call within the first ring. It's going to give them the option to do the prompts that they want to do. Pay their bill, check their balance, see when their next bill's coming out. Also, what this will enable us to do is basically double our availability with our operation. Right now, we currently have 5 customer service representatives available to answer phone calls. What this system will do, we'll add 5 ports, which will basically allow us to have 5 people, and then also 5 ports. So essentially, we have 5 virtual employees. So doubling that availability is definitely going to be something that I believe our customers will be highly satisfied with. One thing the system does do is it goes back up to 6 months to allow customers to see maybe their trend for their winter usage compared to their summer usage, spring to the fall. So they always have that ability to see their increase or decrease in water usage. And the biggest thing that I myself likes and my director likes is the ability to talk to a customer service person. So many times you call someplace and you can't talk to a live person, no matter what buttons you press, no matter how angrily you mash down that phone pad. This is a quick and simple way. Just hit 0 and it'll connect you right with a live person. Some of the other benefits is that it's a seamless integration with our customer database system. SunGuard provides a highly advanced utility system. This links directly to it. It gives live updates. Whenever a payment is made over the phone, it takes less than a second to update it on the account screen. There's a PCI Level 1 compliance that basically makes an almost invaluable security level. There's been some big companies in the last year or two that have had some compliance issues, and it ended up costing them very dearly. This is a way to set up that prevention from that happening. And like I mentioned earlier, we do have a customizable opening to the call. So when someone calls, you can hear a voice, "Thank you for calling Prescott Valley Water. How can I help you?" One thing I will say on that is I will be holding some auditions for some voice actors if you're interested for that. Another big thing is the Spanish language feature. It's going to enable us to be bilingual again. We currently do not have a Spanish-speaking representative in our operation. She, good for her, was promoted recently. Unfortunately for us, we lost that capability to deliver that level of customer service. So this would be able to pick up that vacancy. Another thing is the outbound capabilities that it would be able to do. Whenever a customer might have forgotten to pay their bill, we have an outbound channel that would enable us to call them and give a friendly reminder that their bill is due, and also an option to pay it at that time. After the last presentation I gave, there was a few questions that I left lingering. I apologize for that. One of the things was why this IVR system compared to our web payment system or our Click2Gov system. Through the last several years, we have looked at different ways and how it would benefit the customers the most. Looking at the numbers and how many over-the-phone payments we're currently taking, we're taking approximately 6,000 over-the-phone payments a month compared to 2,100 roughly over our Click2Gov system. So we have almost 3 times the amount of people paying it over the phone. So based on those numbers, we decided that it would be best for our customers and the availability to have this option over the website improvements at this time. It did come down to kind of a which one do we want to do. Unfortunately, budget-wise, we wouldn't have enough to do it both at this time, but the web payment system would be something in the near future that we would definitely be looking at upgrading. Another thing that was brought up is future growth and the capacity of this system. Right now, we are undeniably seeing a growth in our population. Having 5 ports for inbound calls and 1 port for outbound calls with this system is enabling us to allow that availability to where customers can call in and not get busy signals or not be kicked straight to voicemail. The 5 ports can easily handle our population, our number of accounts right now. As we continue to see this growth trend and more customer accounts water accounts are created, we have the flexibility to add more ports, which would handle those extra calls, and then we would also evaluate where we would be at as far as hiring additional employees. This system would not replace employees. It's just basically a very useful tool for our operation and employees to use. And then the determination for that would be on an annual basis where we would be able to track how many calls came through for payments, how many calls came through and went to customer service reps. The system is able to track all those on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. So our evaluation on that would then steer us in the right direction moving forward. Another thing that was brought up was kind of the learning curve that our residents might have to use with getting used to this type of system. Other cities that I have spoken with said that the customers that they have love the system and easily learned it. They had no education, mail-out pamphlets or anything. It just kind of showed up, and their residents were a little surprised when they heard a recording instead of a live person. We wouldn't want to do it that way. We want to let our customers know exactly what this system is and how to use it. With that, the Selectron Technologies would provide these educational pamphlets that we would include in the e-bills and also the mail-out billings for about at least 2 to 3 months. That way we can ensure that that learning curve is minimal for our residents. And at this time, does anyone have any questions?
Questions, Mary?
I just wanted to, maybe I misunderstood, but are you saying we're going to do one or the other? We're going to have the phone and we won't have the website, or the payment?
We will still have our web payment system. At this time, it can be a little sluggish.
Okay.
An upgrade to it would fix that.
Okay.
But
So,
prioritizing what we needed more, we pretty confidently chose this IVR system.
okay, so we're going to have the phone system, but we would still have the web
We'll still have
payments.
the web payments, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Marty?
Yeah, I probably asked it the last time you were here also. The customer service rep will only be available during normal business hours?
Correct. Our operation is only open from 8 to 5 at this time. So with this, if you woke up in the middle of the night because you forgot to pay your water bill, you can call us at 3 o'clock in the morning to make it.
Hey, Mike?
But if they chose the option that they want to speak to a customer service, it will refer them to during Monday to Friday, 8 to 5?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that.
Okay.
Because on the slide it said, customer service, but
sorry for that.
Mike?
Yeah, just curious too. Have we had any complaints regarding access to either telephone or web?
Depending on the time of year and the time of month, we can regularly get some people that have to try to get a hold of us 2, 3, 4 times before they're even able to connect to one of us. And that's simply because of the call volume that we can sometimes have.
And that's the telephone primarily, I would assume.
Correct. We have had a few complaints recently with the website, but that was more of a technical thing. We had an update that had to go on for about 12 hours, so it obviously had to be shut down. But right after that resumed, everything kind of fell back into normalcy with that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? So people can still pay their bills the old-fashioned way? Bring a check in or mail it?
Yes, sir.
Questions? Any? Larry? No? Okay, you're going to bring this back next week?
Well, at this point, with this, I was wondering, with your approval, if we could mark it for next week as consent.
Okay.
I agree.
I think council is agreeable.
Huh?
Get the job done, okay?
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Well,
Mark.
yes, sir.
Good job. Okay. We'll move on into presentation, 5-year operational projections. Diane?
Mr. Mayor, if I can,
I'm sorry.
Introducing this particular item, what I would like to share with you is that we have lived rather nicely for a number of years, believing and acting that when times are good, prepare for the bad. When times are bad, position yourself for the good. Right now we're experiencing some healthy revenue growth, and that is welcome after suffering through 7 years of recession. But while the times are good, we need to, and it is staff's opinion, that we need to be looking out 5 years. Let's take a good critical look at growth as well as revenue generation. As you know, Bill Copey has done a really good job in our staff retreats of giving you a 5-year plan, both on revenue and expenditures. But one thing that we have not done, and I have asked all of the department heads to do, is to prepare a 5-year vision. Okay, what are you going to need in 5 years, both in terms of operational needs, staffing needs, and critical infrastructure maintenance and construction? What do we need going forward 5 years? And let's go ahead and look at a population number. The general plan shows us 5 years out from now being at about 65,000 people. We believe that might be a little aggressive in that it didn't take into account as much of the slowdown that we actually experienced back when that general plan number was generated. There are others in your executive management team that feel that 55,000 is a more accurate number for where we will find ourselves in the year 2020. Richard would land somewhere in between those two numbers, I suspect, but we will, time will tell, and we'll see what sorts of immigration and construction we end up having between now and 2020. But using that as a framework for making projections on operational needs and staffing needs, what we intend to do, with your blessing, is over the course of the next 3 or 4 work studies to have various department heads come in and present their report. What we then intend to do is at the end of that report, we will compile all of that, put it in a spreadsheet form, and present each of you with a binder showing you what we're projecting going forward 5 years. And we just think that's prudent planning, and it's what we end up trying to do on the financial side, which has been very successful. Now we're extending that beyond just the capital needs, but the operational and staffing needs. So with that, Diane gets to be the first one. She is your guinea pig. Feel free to ask all kinds of questions.
Not a problem. Basically, you had an opportunity to take a look at the spreadsheet that I pulled together. I based it on the original ComDev numbers that we talked about 2-3 weeks ago. So it may be a little high, we'll see. But anyway, it'll give you an idea of what we're looking at. And basically what I'm going to talk about is just the highlights, the things that are going to be the real cost factors over the next few years. I'm not going to talk so much about the little things that are everyday cost of doing business stuff. So let's begin. The first thing we're looking at, and that I included on my spreadsheet, was the capital project, or the capital expenses. And as we go along, you know that equipment that we use in different areas become obsolete, or they become undependable, quite frankly. So as time goes on, we plan well in advance for replacement of those things. One of the ones that I'm looking at right now is possibly a replacement of the records management scanner, which has been going now for several years, and that is a major component in my office, so we would not want that ever to go down. So we will plan to buy that on schedule this coming year. You'll notice on the spreadsheet as well that while an election is not planned for this year, I went ahead and calculated a figure anyway based on our last election costs and adjusted them based on what I think the county may charge, as well as what our other contracts may cost too. And I did put a figure in there for you. Our last election cost us $107,000 and change. The next one I'm projecting should be about $125 next year. But that's not where the great impact comes in yet. As we go on, we'll see a greater and greater impact. The remaining line items, as I said, are just the routine purchases and cost of doing business. When we move on to the year 2016-17, you'll notice that there's a substantial bottom line increase on that particular budget. The staffing level, I predict, is going to change a little bit that year based on a couple of things. One, I'm going to recommend the addition of a second records management technician. The additional staff is needed to manage the ever-increasing number of electronic and paper records coming into the Records Center. And also somebody to help with the increasing number of public records requests that we're getting. And most importantly, number 3, succession planning. I anticipate that we're going to need that person to be filled in early in 2016. The second hire I'm looking at is possibly a business license rep, and that is very much based on succession planning purposes to oversee that program and the other affiliate programs that go with it. I'm projecting that I will have a staff member that will probably be leading that year. So we're real heavy into succession planning and cross-training, et cetera, stuff right now. Last, and again, and you know, for many years I've put this in my evaluation for your consideration, I am really recommending again that you consider hiring a full-time risk manager. I really, really am. It's costly. I'm thinking it's probably going to be about $71,000 to hire that person. But I think it's worth it, and I'm going to tell you why. The growth that the town is experiencing right now, the timing is perfect to expand the risk management program into something greater than it is right now, that I do not have the time or the expertise to take it to. I'm talking about building an overall rollover annual self-retention fund. 2, increasing the deductibles beyond what I've already increased them to reduce our premium amounts. And the third thing is expanding the safety training to a greater level than I can currently provide to reduce our claims experience. By the way, I haven't told you before, I have told Larry before, that our property claims, I'm proud to say, have been reduced over the last 3 fiscal years by 94%. The numbers, fiscal year 11-12, it was pretty ugly. We lost over $260,000 in claims. In 2012-13, we reduced it to $87,000 and change. 2013-14, it went down to $15,000 and change. From 3 years prior, when it was at $260,000. Substantial savings there. I'd like to see that trend continue. We need somebody to carry that ball to do it. In the fall of 2016, the town can expect to hold an election for a minimum of council, home rule, and possible proposition. Council will note a substantial increase in the election costs over the 2013 election. As I said, it was $107,000 and change for the 2013. I'm predicting that it's going to run closer to $140,000 that next election cycle. Don't be surprised. And again, it's based on the projected registration numbers and the population number and the participation level of the voters themselves. If it holds true to norm, those percentages should come pretty close to it. Council will also see, again, small increases in the other line items that I won't be going into. One of the larger ones, though, is going to be succession training and for those people coming in. 2017-18, the budget is going up again, mainly due to general costs, everyday costs, with the exception I'm going to need to replace the copier. And that's about $7,000. That's another mainstay in our office. Without that, we're pretty much dead in the water, too, like the scanner. Again, an election is not anticipated this year, and I'm not planning on one, and I did not provide any figures added into our budget that year for it, but I have provided projected figures of what it would cost if we had to hold one. We've discussed the staffing level that will be going on with a couple other employees. We'll also need besides the records management person and, as I said, the business license rep and hopefully a full-timers manager. Year 2018-19, substantial jump in the budget there. That's for the potential, although unrealized, and I base this on there's potential there that we may have to have a new car. But we have treated our 2005 Taurus so gently that I'm guessing that it is going to hold out at least another 10 years. So I may not have to spend that money. An election again is scheduled this year, 2018-19, and the projected costs are going up to about $191,000 that year. Based on the projected population numbers, current voter registration, and current participation levels. I remind you, though, as I started off with, the numbers that my election materials are based on are the higher projected population numbers. So keep that in mind as we go along here. 2019-20, that seems like forever from now, but it's really not. Capital expenses may include a replacement microfilm reader, and that's a major expense. $17,000 for one of those. That's today's prices. Hopefully it'll come down by then. A couple extra computers, but by that, those are budgeted through IT expenses. Staffing levels remain the same as far as I can predict. Educational endeavors will continue with our new staff online. So as you can see, in closing here, our expense drivers are the elections, succession planning, staffing, and maintenance agreements. Does anybody have any questions about that? I could show you the page with the bottom line, but it's the one also with all the general line items on it. But I can show you the bottom line if you're interested in seeing that. I know you've already reviewed it. I'm getting one no. Don't need to see it? Okay. Do you have any questions for me about any of this?
Questions? Mike?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One was the claims. What's the general claim that we see that you were talking about?
Predominantly vehicle accidents, halved, I would say, by sewer issues. We had some extensive sewer problems and claims that year, just major ones, and that continued into the next year as well. So, yeah, we're having problems with both of those issues, but we're slowly reducing them.
And those are generally covered by liability that we may have as far as insurance?
Property and liability.
Right. Yeah, okay. And then your risk manager, I'm just wondering, what are some of the traditional activities, duties of a risk manager that is not necessarily being addressed now that could be with a new staff person?
Well, as I said, I'd like to see the town go to a self-insured retention program as well, thereby reducing the premium even further. What that means is you manage a certain amount of the claims in-house.
Right.
That is something that somebody would have to devote a lot of time to. If we were to set an in-house retention at, say, $150,000, that is just about 100% of our claims would be handled in-house. That takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we'd also like to see it go to an enterprise risk management program whereby we don't just talk about property liability and workman's comp. We talk about decisions that council makes, that department heads make, and what's the risk involved in that. A good example of that is the event center. Mm-hmm. That would have been taken into account in an enterprise risk management program. The risk involved of taking that step in all those buckets lined up. What would be the odds of that happening?
Right.
We would have figured that out up front.
So it's not necessarily an attorney, not that it's...
No.
A risk manager doesn't have legal training or background? No.
No.
So we'd use our own attorney for any legal issues related to that?
Oh, yes, for any legal issues. But in many times, too, you would find that you may not have as many. If you go to an ERM program, you may not have any because you would have already figured out what the risks are and whether you want to assume it or not.
No, I like that idea. I think that's a great approach, and hopefully we'll pursue that.
And there's another option to that, too, that goes along with that type of program, and that is that each department pays for their own claims over periods of time. They generate the risk. They pay for that amount for the risk every premium year. Mm-hmm. And that kind of helps reduce claims as well. People become a little bit more conscious of what's going on around them.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think a good example is when we were talking about the issue in the police department relative to injuries and how we've reduced that various ways, which I think we've done a great job.
Those injuries, for the most part, go hand in hand with what I handle. Right. If there's a property type, say with a vehicle or something like that, and an employee, it typically goes to HR for workman's comp too. That's the way it works. But typically too, you will find that many times, if it's a severe accident, that that workman's comp claim grows much quicker due to the expenses of what medical care is charging these days.
Right.
Quite frankly, it's much less expensive to repair a car than a body.
Those increased costs, too, as workers' comp comes out of our budget as well. So,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay, well, thank you.
Good. Any other, Laura?
I would just like to comment that I think it puts us in the arena of best practices, and I'm looking forward to us to be able to go there, because we always challenge ourselves on how we can be better, and now here's an unidentified area, and that's called best practices.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? Mary, did you have one?
No.
Good presentation. Anything else, Diane? One more side of you.
No, that's all. Thank you.
That's it, huh? Well, thank you, Diane. Okay. Then we'll move on to number 6, presentation, community development 5-year operations project. Richard?
Sorry, I usually don't play with technology, but it would enhance my presentation. I'm going to take a little different approach and talk about the operations and community development. Community development is largely funded out of fees that are charged for services. So when we have a great deal of volume in building safety, we by and large recap the cost of the community development department. And those fees pay for principally staff. I'm not going to address capital costs. There are automobiles associated with traveling around town and things like that, and I'd invite you to drive around in our 1990 Buick Liberty. That seems to do just fine. But the costs are directly related to the calls for services that we get. So during the most robust times, our service levels have gone up, meaning the number of customers that we service on a daily basis. And so on that basis, our building safety staff has gone up. This illustration presents the previous staffing needs, and you can see that we swelled during the really good times to our largest staffing, which I think was 22 individuals. We're now at 17 as part of the proposed budget by adding an additional building inspector. One thing that I was very proud that the council and executive management supported was when we had that downturn, we didn't furlough staff, we didn't lay them off, rather we found other things for them to do. So having learned from that experience, we're electing to fold in some assumptions which will really drive our staffing requests into the future. These are the assumptions that we're building into our approach, and that is building permits will continue to rise 10% per annum. We believe, based on trend analysis, and I think I spoke with you most recently, we have seen that trend continue over the course of the last several years. We're up around 52 residential starts this last month. We continue to anticipate problems in bringing in the trades that are necessary to build the houses. But we are also, as part of that, seeing an uptick in planning items. So the front end of our group is pretty busy, and you're going to be seeing more activity through the Planning and Zoning Commission. That doesn't involve presently any additional staff. The director and 2 planners seem to be able to handle that quite readily. In the future, if those volumes continue to increase, there may be additional staff, but at this point in time, I'm not contemplating that. One thing that we were very successful in was moving people around in the department. I find that during the good times, we're busy working on new buildings. During the rough times, we're equally or even more busy dealing with cleaning up messes. And you recall a lot of the foreclosures that went through our office. People weren't readily available to stand up and say, yeah, that's my property, we know it's a mess, and we're going to get busy cleaning it up. So we spent a lot more time doing code enforcement. I find now that we're ramping back up, the fact that we cross-trained those staff, the fact that all of the building safety division, with the exception of our building official, have been trained as code enforcement officers. So that ebb and flow, we believe there's some value to cross-training, and the new person that comes in will first start in code enforcement and understand that, actually go in the field, do that kind of work for a period of time, so that as that ebb and flow happens, we can accommodate the service levels of our customers. The other couple of assumptions are that we will be annexing areas surrounding the town of Prescott Valley, some of which may need more code enforcement inspections or higher level than we currently have through the town. Having done proactive code enforcement in the town of Prescott Valley, we're at a pretty stagnant level routine on a monthly basis because we cover about the same amount of area monthly. The other unfortunate thing is we fully expect that there will be upticks, as we are currently experiencing, and then downturns in the economy, and that ebb and flow will be present throughout our efforts in community development. Putting into play then the assumptions that I've outlined, we're looking at two budgets, hence getting back to a level of staffing that we were during the most robust times of 2006. That's going to be based on the number of calls for services, our ability to get around town. I have seen where we are using up now most of the lots in the historic town site. You see a lot of newer development there. We're building a lot of duplexes there. And as that type of activity diminishes, that takes less time for the inspector to go out to the newer developments and literally park themselves there and do their inspections there and then return to work. We have applied technologies in the community development department very similar to what's being considered as part of utilities with Selectron. They've saved us time and effort. At one point in time we talked about doing computer entry in the field. I find that that really doesn't save time because they create more mistakes doing that work in the field as opposed to coming back, servicing their customer, sitting down at a PC. So while that's a capital cost, that may be something that could be considered into the future to lessen the need for additional staff. And this presents calls for service based on adding population. In the master plan communities in the town of Prescott Valley, we have fewer calls for service because they are overseen by homeowners associations that are active. We have other areas of town that we are in every day, week, and month, responding not only to complaints but following up on inspections. These numbers are based on the assumption that I'm making that approximately every 2 years we would add additional areas outside of the current corporate boundaries of the town of Prescott Valley, and that will drive somewhat the need for additional code enforcement staff. But once again, the approach that I'd like to take is to establish parity and compensation for both building safety as well as code enforcement. They have similarities between the two, but they do different, both difficult jobs. And by doing that, we'll be able to match that ebb and flow. I haven't discussed with Larry any future capital at present. We've currently relied on the staff talent to try to reach out and get grants, and we are very hopeful that this year we'll get a grant for software systems. We would then be coming to you, talking to you about a service fee associated with every building permit, which would maintain those technologies into the future. So if you call for service, you request services in building safety, you pay an additional fee. Yavapai County currently charges a very similar fee. It's $40 on every one of their permits. I looked at a fee structure, and I would believe that it would be supported on about $15 per permit. With that, I've not gone into the minutia that I'm known for, but I would try to respond to any questions that you may have.
Anybody want to add to the minutia? Mike?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. One was, how many code enforcement and building safety people do we have?
We have 4 building safety folks, which include the building official. We have 3 code enforcement officers, which includes the senior code enforcement officer, the supervisor, Fernando Gonzalez. Both supervisors do other things other than inspections, and I've been really encouraging Woody to do more office work, interacting with people as opposed to necessarily being in the field. Because of the number of commercial buildings that we've had, Woody's our ace in the hole. Woody's been out in the field a lot, and so I've been working with him to try to get him to bring his staff up to a higher level. As part of this budget, there is a proposal that you're formally considering adding an additional building safety person. So at that point, we would have 5 people. During the most robust time, Michael, we had 7 inspectors, and that included Woody. I don't know that we're going to get back there as quickly as we did. At that point in time, the wheels were coming off. We were doing 150 residential starts a month.
The other question I had was, I know we have, I think, 2 hearing officers that kind of sit through a resolution, as I perceive it anyway, in terms of issues relative to, I guess, calls for service.
We now interact with the hearing officer process as customers, but in order to be able to bring that to a head, there are many, many notifications, many contacts with our customers before we get an opportunity to go to the hearing officer. But the hearing officer, the actual hearings, are now in executive management, and they're handled by Larry's staff.
Okay.
But we then do the follow-up. If there's a fine imposed, we take that and record that fine. We follow up to cause compliance, and we follow up and actually, through our collection agency, collect fines and sanctions as they're imposed. So we still do all of that work.
So that doesn't really reduce the number of calls or anything. It's really more a resolution effort.
It is. Well, I will say it's effective. It is, because we're working with somebody, working with them, and finally they shut down. The next step is you need to come talk to the judge, and the judge has, in most instances, set compliance dates that are harsher than we've tried to negotiate administratively. And we find that some people do come into compliance, but we also find that those who snub their nose at the process find out the hard way when they end up selling their property. They find that there's a fine out there that has to be satisfied before they can move forward. I find it to be very effective.
Okay, thank you.
I can also share, just as an aside, of the people that we engage, I would think that less than 0.1% of our customers get an opportunity to go talk to the hearing officer.
Any other questions? Comments?
No. Thank you for your attention.
Richard, keep up the good work. Appreciate that. Okay, we move on to number 7. Presentation, Executive Management 5-year operational projections. Larry?
Okay, Mayor and Council, one thing that I failed to state in the introduction to this approach to planning for the future and preparing ourselves for a population significantly bigger than what we have now is one thing that we're not going to abandon because we're very proud of it and it's very cost effective, and that is today we are operating the organization with about 5.1 employees per 1,000 people. I don't know of any city or town in the state of Arizona that can say that. Okay, we're very proud of that. And the ramifications of operating an organization that relies heavily on the private sector because of our outsourcing of so many elements of what we do has a ripple effect through our revenue stream that comes in and the expenditures that we make. And nowhere does it show up as wildly, if you will, than on legacy costs. There are cities in the state and all over the country that are spending anywhere from 20 to 40% of their total general fund budgets to fund retirement programs. And it is, right now, it's probably the most critical discussion point out there for cities and towns across the country and in Arizona, where cities are struggling because of unfunded legacy costs. Our general fund contribution for retirement is 6%, a far cry from 25 to 50% of a general fund budget that is going to legacy costs. We're proud of that. And the reason that we have such a small number is because we are very efficient in our operation and we outsource so much of our operations. And so when we bring these presentations to you looking out 5 years, it is suggested strongly that we confine our service levels to what we can reasonably provide within that framework, meaning 5-6 at the max employees per 1,000. So as the population grows, certainly there's going to be a need for additional employees or additional contracting out for services. So I just wanted to use that as a framework. Now, getting in specifically, if you will turn to the handout that is labeled 5-Year Town Council Operational Plan. That particular handout is calling for an adjustment in the salary for mayor and council. You'll see that there is a annual survey there showing where the town of Prescott Valley is as it relates to other cities and towns of approximately our same size. It would certainly suggest that an adjustment is appropriate. And if you turn to the last page of the handout, you'll see the cost to the organization doing that going forward. On the second page, one thing that you'll note is that training and traveling for the town council budget was reduced dramatically during the recession. I believe that any of you that are on council that have been here for any length of time saw the benefit of some of those training programs and some of the conferences that we haven't been able to attend for about the last 7 years. And I think that there's really some advantage to bump those particular budgets back up. In particular, one thing that you haven't been able to do is either be at the League of Cities or the Arizona Governor's Economic Development Conference. Quite frankly, I think both of them have equal value, and really, I think that we need to address that going forward. In addition to that, more frequent attendance at Arizona town halls and any of the other opportunities out there for training and conferencing that, quite frankly, we just haven't had the money to be able to do that. And I think that personal opinion is that we need to fund that more heavily. Any comment on that? Okay. Another thing that was in the town council budget was an annual employee appreciation. It was called the Winter Gala. That went by the wayside back in 2007. That was something that was very much appreciated by all the employees. That was dropped out during the recession. And that is one of those things that, quite frankly, when you do, when the council sponsors events like that, you end up reducing turnover within your organization. Quite frankly, it's easy to point to that. And that's something that we need to, in our opinion, reintroduce and fund as we go forward. Certainly, none of this is in the budget that you are looking at today. But going forward, and as the organization grows, I think that's more important. And then the last thing under the town council budget, you heard Richard talk about the hearing officers. That has been moved here, and as you are also aware, boards and commissions are handled by the staff, and there's actually about a $10,000 software that would make that much better, and so we have thrown that in. And if you go to the last page, you'll see that has been thrown in as a $10,000 item. The actual maintenance on that will not be $10,000 a year. It'll be more like $2,500 for a maintenance fee, but the initial purchase price is about $10,000. But anyway, you'll see that broken out in that chart. And so I ask you if you have any questions on the council operation plan for the next 5 years.
Questions, anyone?
Does it appear reasonable?
I think
am I leaving anything out that is a high priority to you?
I was just pleased to see the inclusion of Arizona Town Hall because the next one's on water.
Mm-hmm.
And
as you know, that is by invitation only by that organization, and but nevertheless, it would be a travesty if we have an elected official and or staff that are invited to that and unable to attend. The mayor has been to how many, Mr. Mayor? 3 or 4?
3.
3. I've been to 3 different Arizona town halls, and I know that Mary has been to one most recently here on transportation. But the entire process is a very good process, and one that if we are invited or if we have an opportunity to fill a spot, we need to take that opportunity.
I think they only invite us about once every 3 years individually.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? I think those are good plans there, Larry. An employee gala, I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well then if you will turn to the second document, which is the 5-year executive management operational plan. The first one, the bullet point is economic development, and in conversation with your economic development manager, Greg Pfister, he has generated some numbers that he believes to be reasonably sound, and that is going forward. When he says economic development contracts, he's talking PVEDF and GPREP and anything else unknown that is out there on the horizon. And this is very consistent with your town council goals, which is job creation. Do what we need to do to bring jobs to the town of Prescott Valley. And so, as you well know, part of our 3-legged stool includes assistance to the Chamber of Commerce, PVEDF, and then Greg is the 3rd leg of that stool. We also have a 4th leg, if you will, and that's GPREP. And so making sure that we are participants and that we are getting our money's worth out of those organizations is important, but we also need to be there. We're going to have to spend money to go ahead and bring in jobs to the community. So those were Greg's recommendations. He is of the belief that he will not need additional staffing to go ahead and cause that to happen going forward to the population of 55 to 65,000. That won't be the issue, but what will be the issue is going ahead and making sure that our contractors continue to remain healthy. Okay, going to the next item, Volunteer Central. It has been very successful to date. We're talking about adding a position a couple of years out, a position in terms of support staff. That would be in 17-18. That's to go ahead and supplement the volunteer help that is presently at work staffing that office. but there's a belief that at some point going forward that we will end up needing to do that. That's actually shown in 16-17, but we'll see how that goes. We believe that that will end up paying itself off in spades by going ahead and growing that particular program. And with your blessing, we will continue to be budgeting for the annual volunteer appreciation dinner. I've challenged the coordinator to have 500 people there for the dinner next year. Might be a little aggressive, but that's okay. Next item on the list here is equipment. You're looking at replacing the truck that we have. As you know, that the Jeep, the council Jeep, is being replaced in the new budget year as it's proposed going forward. But by then, the truck will end up needing some tender love and care, and it will end up going to, I'm assuming, Public Works and or the utility department, and work locally as opposed to expecting it to make it out of town up and down the road. In addition to that, you will see a digital conversion unit for Channel 9. It is believed that to maintain high quality television that in the year 17-18 that piece of equipment will need to be replaced. And as you will note, it's a fairly pricey item at $75,000. Moving to capital projects coordination, you'll see that we're talking about a software program, but nothing in terms of staffing until 2018, which would be a technician to assist the capital coordinator. But that's out several years, contingent on the growth that we're projecting. And then on water resources, you'll see that we're looking at a water resource specialist or a technician to help John, but that won't happen until 2021. Quite a ways out that John will be able to continue to handle that responsibility going forward. But right about 2021, you're going to see an uptick in the effort related to SRP and the importation of water from the Big Chino, and so John is of the belief that he will need some assistance there. But as you will see, we're not looking at much for staffing in that department. We do a lot of outsourcing in executive management, and we intend to continue doing that and be very thrifty despite the increase in population. That's it. Do you have any questions?
Questions, anyone?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this, the looking out to the 5 years and seeing as we go forward and the population growing, and knowing that with more people out there on the streets going from one place to another, or houses being built, and the demand and the need that a population brings. So I do like this, and thank you for bringing it.
Yeah, we thought that this was important going forward, that, you know, we do have a capital improvement program, and we will have Norm and Kim talking about that in one of these meetings, because that's where the big numbers are. But also just keeping in mind to what we're going to have to do to supplement on the staffing side.
Good. Mike, question?
Yeah, I just had a comment, and that is, you know, when we look at visioning, I think one thing that I feel I need more, I guess, exposure to is how we develop a vision for economic development. And I know we use that three-legged stool, and they kind of have their own, I think, internal vision, and hopefully we'll have a better idea what that is and what we want to do in the future relative to economic development. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out, or if there's a vision yet for that.
Well, and that's a really good point, and I think that we now have a new director at PVDF, and they've been working up goals and objectives, and they're looking at having a retreat. They had one scheduled that had to be pushed back, but once they end up updating their goals and objectives and how they intend to make the approaches to bring new jobs to the community, we will have them come and present that plan to you in a work study sometime, hopefully before the summer's over. They've already had some successes, which are we can't go into that in any amount of detail at this point in time, but there are successes that PVEDF and their new director, quite frankly, have done a really good job on, and there will be announcements coming forward on that. GPREP is in its formative stages, making sure that they continue a dialogue with us. They have just hired a director for GPREP that we will have here before you, talking about the regional efforts to grow jobs, what they intend to do, how they intend to go forward, and then having Greg with routine updates on what his mission is on commercial development. And quite frankly, you will, I believe, recognize that in the last 2 to 3 years that he has done what most people would be thrilled to do in an entire career. And in 36 months, when you can sit back and look at over 1.5 million square feet of new commercial in the community, that's career defining. And Greg Pfister has done that for us.
Other questions, comments? Appreciate the sheets of information, Larry.
Well, and once again, we will compile it all with spreadsheets, and it'll be in a binder, and it'll be part of a vision going forward. And we think that this is a good thing.
Good. Other questions, comments? If there's none, we have one final action, and that's adjournment. Thank you all for coming. Meeting is adjourned.